Hey guys, and welcome to Movie Mumbles, where the Mumbles have movies and the movies have mumbles. I'm here with my boy Roy. Say hi, Roy.
Jeez, you sound like you were having lung cancer for a second. I don't know.
Well, I thought I'd add a little bit more flavor with it. This session, this time, this insert space of something here.
Yeah.
We have been watching Princess Mononoke. I know I can't pronounce that for some reason. I cannot do it.
Princess Mononoke.
Yep. So we've been watching Princess Mononoke for the theme of Studio Ghibli.
Yes, indeed. Yep, definitely.
And this effectively follows the tale of a prince who gets struck by a demon very, very early on and is contaminated.
Cursed, yeah.
By this dark magic, this demon magic, and must go forth away from his village on a new quest and a new journey. And from now on, there will be spoilers ahead. So, what did you think of the film, Roy?
Well, I'll be honest, this is one of those big, like, if you're a big Studio Ghibli Hayao Miyazaki fan, this is one of those big movies you should like the big obvious one you should check out, because this is like a beloved anime classic. You know, there's a lot of Hayao Miyazaki's quirks and themes in there, like a lot of Miyazaki that you see in a lot of his works. Like there's the whole theme of nature, there's the strong female characters, there's a lot of his little quirks that I think this is like, there's a lot of that stuff in Hayao Miyazaki movies that's particularly noticeable in this film. Particularly the whole environmental thing, which is a major part of this movie. But we can talk as much or as little about that, because
it's a huge part of this film. So yeah. There's obviously very clear messages about loving Mother Nature and everything like that.
Yeah, but I think it's a more nuanced take on this type of, save the environment, green message than
it is taking a message and a problem from our world, and it is thrusting it into a different universe, a different world, and telling it through the eyes of someone completely different. And yet, because it's a common theme that we have, we still relate with this world.
These
characters. It's very similar to Howl's Moving Castle in a number of ways, in those sort of ideals, where you're taking real life ideals and putting them in this fantasy world, and it draws you into the universe.
Yeah, and obviously Princess Mononoke is not the only film to deal with environmental messages. Like, it's an obvious cliched premise that you would see in something like Fern Gully or Avatar even. But, like, I think this film does a better job tackling this type of environmental theme. I think, because when you hear these types of narratives, they usually paint the humans as the obvious bad guys, and then nature as the obvious good guys, and that, we should just go back to nature. But honestly, I think this film offers a more nuanced, a more grayish area where there's not a real clear bad guy per se. Now, obviously, the humans are destroying the nature, and that's a major conflict in the movie, but also they make a point where the animals aren't exactly, I think essentially Hayao Miyazaki's take is that, yes, it's wrong for humans to destroy nature, but obviously destroying humans is not the solution, because even the human antagonists, if you were to call them that, they have, humanity to them. They're not just the obvious bad guys. Essentially, you could boil down this main thing with the characters of San, who is the titular Princess Mononoke, and Lady Abushi, essentially.
Yes, there are actually very, very stark differences. In fact, I think in the story it's kind of stated that San was once a human child or something. So that always makes me feel that Lady...
she is human.
Yeah, she is. But they see
she's
her,
just raised by wolves,
throughout the whole film, she sees herself as a wolf. So Lady Ms. whatever her freaking name is, I don't know, I'm terrible with the English names, let alone foreign names that I can't pronounce very well. Essentially, like, I'm pretty sure during the story, she says a bunch of stuff about how for fuck's sake, Roy, just say the names for me.
San, Princess Mononoke, essentially, but she's called San.
Yeah, so she voices how San was once like this human being who was relatable and was corrupted by the gods, and they make it. She, in particular, makes it very, very much a point of taking down this god, because gods are not what you think they are. They can be killed, they can be slain, and this is how we do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the whole setup is that she's working on an iron mill. Essentially, she's making weapons to kill the forest god. So very clearly, in any other type of narrative, she'd be the clear-cut bad guy. But like the movie gives us moments to show like she does actually care about like the people in her village, and they make it clear that most of the women are actually like they were taken from like brothels to leave a better life, and to particular a scene where it shows that she takes care of the lepers when everyone else would have probably abandoned them.
That's actually another really interesting subplot that you can relate back to human beings from our, like real people, Generally, when there are diseased or ill people around, the majority of people will just kind of stay away and keep them at arm's length and just kind of ignore them, And that's still a thing. It's a lot better now than what it used to be, but it's still there. Like, if you've got a disability, you kind of, like, you do feel shunned to one side. And
I think, and in particular, those details help show the humanity in this person, and really, it makes the thing grayer, essentially, because it's not just the clear-cut, she's doing bad things to the environment, so she's automatically pure evil. It's even kind of seems like that at first, but then it's shown that she's, an actual caring person.
She's definitely got her own motives. She definitely has her reasons why she's doing this. And over time, even at the end, you still kind of understand where she's coming from, really. It kind of goes to a little bit of a point where instead of going back and caring for the women and her friends and the people that she has taken in, basically there is a choice. She can go back and defend them from the oncoming armies and the war and stuff. That's another social commentary as well. There's like the war stuff. But instead of doing that, she has to go forward in her Moby Dick style, must get the whale kind of feel behind it, Captain Ahab has to go and get his whale, and it's very much that kind of theme from her point of view. I see it as.
And it's not just, she's killing the god because she's evil. There is a motivation behind it. These creatures are technically, they've been killing the humans, and there is there's a reason on both sides. Like, they've been tampering with their nature, so that's why the animals are attacking. But you can argue like it's a thing between innovation and technology, like innovating and like essentially making like the lives better of her people versus just caring, just trying to help the nature itself. It's much more complicated than, and I do give Hayao Miyazaki credit for it. He does show there is a complexity to it. It's not just nature is good and humans are evil and technology is evil and stuff, which I definitely appreciate.
And like throughout actually let's move on a little bit to like the story building and the actual world that this is set in, because very much like Howl's Moving Castle, this has its own little universe that it lives in, and I don't know if this is preset off like stories. I know that House was. I think this is an original story. It might be there's some. Well, there's definitely parallels with
there's some elements,
different stories like fairy tales and stuff throughout history. But I mean, I think it's its own original story first, from those parallels kind of thing. But the way that they get you integrated into this world, and not just the way that it is kind of set with the real life problems that they've thrown in this. Like, you start off in this very realistic kind of feeling. It feels very ancient Asian huntsman kind of small villages protecting the warrior kind of ideals. But then the demon comes out of nowhere, and straight away you're into this Final Fantasy magical-esque kind of ideal, and you never question that. You just accept it and move on, and every time they up the ante, you just accept it. Because the way that, like, the sound works and the way that the storytelling is visually, it's just very welcoming.
Yeah.
It eases you in.
A quick thing before we continue. Do you watch the English dub for this one also, like last week? Or did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so it's just kind of interesting. Going a bit off topic for a bit, but I think it's also interesting. It's not just humans versus nature, but even the animals have conflicts with each other, particularly like the wolves versus the gorillas and the wolves versus the boars. Essentially, they're all different factions. It's not like they're all like they all have conflicts within each other and how to deal with the humans essentially. In particular, Keith David in the English version voices Koto, who's like the blind boar. I think you might have recognized his voice like as that white blind boar. He's not the boar that was killed in the beginning, but like the boar god later in the film.
Yeah. I did notice that.
And it's interesting. Like his character, for instance, like he could have been another like obvious like bad guy for like the animals. Essentially, like he wants to kill the humans and all that stuff. But like again, like considering the damage that was done to the other the boar god. I almost said beer god. But the other boar god, and in general, like they are technically, you see essentially just as like this old or blind, like crippled god essentially that's essentially dying, and you see him just like he's so confused he doesn't recognize the humans that are disguised as the boars and think they are his like boars coming to help him, and he's just, you can see like it's such a sad state.
And because he's so old, he won't listen to the young ideals, the ones that have realized the mistakes, and he won't change, and because of that he becomes a fully fledged demon and nearly takes the life of people, innocent people, kind of with him.
And it's also technically his fault that the big forest god dies, because he directly leads the humans unknowingly to the god. I think it's interesting too, because like we associate Hayao Miyazaki. I wouldn't say his work is kid stuff per se, but he's more childish friend, like
he's family friendly.
Yeah, well, generally speaking, they're family friendly. But this film, like, there's actual gore in it. Like, there's like
I would still say that this is a family friendly film that I would happily show to my children.
Really, like even all the decapitations and the arm removals and all that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I'm not saying it's Akira bad, but like I don't know, it's interesting. Like I think this is probably his goriest movie. Like looking back, I don't think it's ever gotten this violent. Like especially compared to like Ponyo or something. Like I don't know. It's just this is one of his earlier films.
I can't think off the top of my head. Like Hounds wasn't too bad.
I watched that as a kid. I didn't have it. Yeah, there was war, but there wasn't the gore that's in this movie. Which is, I mean, I'm not saying it's like gratuitous or anything, but it's just interesting.
I mean, I watched fucking South Park as a kid, so I don't really have a really good reference point as what kids would be watching, that sort of thing. I think the most kiddish thing that I was probably watching was maybe Power Rangers, and Americans call that violent. I mean, so, you know.
Well, I mean, I watched Power Rangers too as a kid, so I don't know. I mean, well, that's a bit off topic. So, anything else you want to say about the movie? Like any interesting things that caught your eye?
So let's go back to the social commentary thing. There was actually a part that I really generally liked that we haven't actually mentioned yet, and it's not a main focus of the film, but it's like one of these side kind of not illusions, but one of these side kind of stories, these narratives that you're just like, that kind of blows you away when you really think about it and really think about the meanings behind it. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, there is a very huge commentary on PTSD, right?
Really? Okay. Why would you say that?
The war scenes towards the end, you've got a lot of people kind of groaning in this, like at the end of the war scene, there's a lot of dead bodies around, but it's very grim. And there's like, every so often, there's like just one soldier that is just, either stone silent and just awake, or just outright kind of screaming. And for me, that was the hardest bit to watch, because that was almost too real, because that's what a war zone is, you know. So yeah, no, I like the fact, again, going back to the social commentary thing, I like the fact that he's able to break down such real life issues and put them into this fantasy world and still make them feel real.
Okay. I think it's that like, it's not a obvious, it's not like it's not a super obvious thing that's in the movie, but I love when, like, Hayao Miyazaki puts those, like, details in. Like, he didn't like, an example from another Miyazaki movie, Spirited Away, for instance, is like when Chihiro's putting on her shoes, she, like, actually does, like, she like hits the back of her feet just to make sure it's set in, for example. Like, those minor details. Like, any other anime would just, like, literally have her put on the shoe and that's it. But, like, he always puts those little details in there. I'm it's just to show, like a more realistic. An example I can name from this movie, like when the scene where I forgot the main character's name. It's Ashitaka, when he, like, is climbing up the roof and, like, his foot, his left foot, like, accidentally, like, breaks off some of the roof top as he's getting on there. Like, that's just a little detail that he didn't need to include there. He could have just had him go up the roof, no problem. But he put that in there because it's more human. It's more, you know, it's just, you know, he adds more, you know, flaws, or, like, little, not flaws per se, but, like, adds those human flaws into the movie, into the animation, which I can always commend him in.
No. I actually, no, it's weird that you say that, because if you look at the main characters, especially in, like, Howl's and
Mononoke.
Like, if you look at the main characters, they all have, like, flaws, right?
Right.
And it's either flaws that are thrust upon them. In fact, it's usually flaws that are thrust upon them. So, like, for instance, like, his contamination, his disease that was spreading through his arms, and then towards the end, it was all over his chest, like, literally the demon had almost consumed him, kind of thing. Think back to Howl's, when Sophie, it starts off as an elder woman and then slowly becomes back to being young again. So it's like something that's been thrust upon them, these characters, and they've got to overcome it. And there's always, like, a ticking time. There's always, like, some sort of motive or reason for them to like, either fix themselves. And most importantly, yes, the endings are kind of happy, but nothing just gets reset. Everything has changed. Right. So the entire world has changed. He will never get to go back to his original village. His
that's established from the beginning. Yeah.
So he's never going back to the beginning. It's a happy ending, but it's also realistic, because change happens. And that's, you know, that's realistic. And it's the same with Howl's Moving Castle. Sophie doesn't go back to being Sophie. She ends up living with Cal, far away from it. Far away from her castle.
I do appreciate that in Howl's. Even, like, the romance, like, there is a bit of a thing. It's much more subtler than in Howl's Moving Castle, but, like, there is a thing between the two main characters, San and Ashitaki, where they are, you know, there is a bit of a romance going on. But by the end, I mean, they're not, like, together. Like, it's not like at the end of Howl's Moving Castle
where
like
they're
living
friendship rather than an actual relationship. Now, the reason why I think it's like that is because the main character is male, whereas in Howl's, the main character is female. So there's going to be more of a romance kind of. Maybe that's just my very sexist and opinionated look on it. But I think I think why, like, this is definitely more of a warrior's kind of point of view. So maybe he wouldn't be as sentimental as, say, Sophie, who is a young woman who wants to be married off.
I think it's just it's different. It's different types of stories. I wouldn't say it is a male female thing. So
well, no, I'm still holding by that, because that it's not intentional, and it still kind of works. But because the main character is, like, this male macho figure, you know, he's a warrior, I mean, you don't hear of warriors that have a really soft, compassionate side. Oh my god, I just want to go and get married right now. That you don't get that with warriors, like, do you? Whereas Sophie was kind of a little bit more about that. She kind of was, I'm not pretty, that sort of thing, and she was more about her self-reflection, whereas the main character in this was incredibly full of himself and self-assured, and he was strong. He was able to keep going, and I'm not saying that men are stronger than women or anything like that, but that's how it's very much presented, or how I'm kind of visualizing this film. And I think because you've got more of a warrior's kind of tale behind this, you don't have that. You lose out on that sentimental thing, which is actually if I'm honest, that's actually a negative thing for me. I would have liked to have seen more of the romance from these two characters.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think it kind of works, because it's not, obviously, they're of two different ideologies, and they don't change their ideologies by the end of it. They're still, like, Sans, like, doesn't like humans, but she's okay with Ashi Atagi kind of thing, which I'm kind of fine with. Like, I think, honestly, I think maybe the story would have worked better if there wasn't a romance per se, but I think the romance here is, like, it's just enough where it's not overbearing, I would think.
Staying on the romance thing, I also didn't like how they handled, not the women in the village. I actually really enjoyed how the women were presented, and it's not how the males were presented in the village either. I like both of the sides. What I didn't like was how all the females were, like, clamming over the main character, as though you're supposed to presume that, every woman under the sun loves this character, because he's so strong, he's better than all the other males, he's compassionate, he's kind.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he's probably
hard on the inside.
I mean, to be fair, he's probably the most attractive male character in the movie.
Well, but
to be fair,
it just feels very
strong-wise.
Like, it feels like that they've dealt with this topic and they're slapping me in the face with it. So it's like saying, this character is attractive, everyone loves him, kind of thing. And again, that's another negative for me. I'm kind of a little bit fed up of main characters, especially in, like, anime and stuff. Main characters being, like, the overly attractive, in my eyes, bland, like, physically and, like, realistically drawn. There's not much going on. Whereas, like, if you get, like, an interesting ugly character, there's a lot more things going on in the face. Like, when Sophie was old, I actually preferred her looking like that, because there was a lot more going on in the face, and there was a lot more animation involved. But then when she was young and pretty, it was like, not really. I'm not really that bothered. It just feels bland.
I mean, I'd have a different opinion on that. I could argue, like, you can argue, like, maybe it's more of a, like, oh, this is, like, the first new male they've seen in the village after, like, they essentially just live in this village, so it might be one of those things.
But then,
and to be fair, design-wise, he's
all these women still only think about sex, even though they're outside of the brothel. So it just feels like they've not accomplished.
I get what you mean.
They
I don't think it's as bad as you think,
because they've broken away from the brothels, and yet they're still kind of thinking about that sort of thing as soon as the hunky man
But you're
comes
basically
along.
saying, But you're basically saying they're not allowed to be sexual, even though they're used to be.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that during that scene, it was over the top, ham-fisted, and shoved in your face. It could have been a lot more subtle, kind of thing. Whereas, like, everyone was literally pining at the door, where, like, looking at him. He's drinking with the lads, and they're all, like, looking through the windows and climbing. Oh my god, he's so attractive. Oh my god, like. And it just feels very ham-fisted. Whereas instead of having the message of saying, hey, these girls have moved on and will and view male figures slightly differently anymore. Like, I would have liked it if they didn't like him. Like, just because he's the main character doesn't mean that everyone else has to like him in the film. I mean, look at Hannibal, for instance. Like, exactly.
Well,
not everyone likes Hitler. Everyone hates him in those films.
I thought you were about to say everyone hates Hitler for a second. Sorry.
Exactly, but he's still the main character. Like, so, that's just a point of view that I think they could have really led with. They could, especially with the demon side. The demon side of him, like, that could have been really flushed out a little bit more, and these women could have been like, no, this is you're a freak. Get out of our village, kind of thing. Instead of
you have
amazing. Oh my god.
Okay. Well, I think you're getting too preoccupied with one particular point. Because honestly,
well, I mean, I'm trying to analyze it and break it down. No. That's how you analyze and break things down. You pick out one point and then expand it.
No, I get you, but like I feel like with the whole in general, I don't think it's as big of a deal when you look at it as a general whole, I think. But before we close this off, there's just a few points I want to give. Obviously, the animation, I don't think we even need to mention it. I think everyone who's, I don't think there's been a bad Miyazaki film in terms of animation. Like, the man is obviously very talented. Particularly in this film, the scenery is just fucking gorgeous. There's so much incredible animation, and particularly, with the area of the forest. God, you know what I'm talking about, with the one with the water and, that general area. Those scenes are fucking gorgeous. Particularly whenever you see, the forest, God, for the first time, and there's, this silhouette in the blinding sunlight, essentially. It's fucking incredible. The animation throughout is fucking incredible, whether it's the fight scene or a more quiet scene. It's just beautiful. It's perfect. And anything, and your thoughts or anything to add?
No, I think we've pretty much hit everything that I've been trying to achieve there.
Okay. Wait, one quick character thing. It's a quick. We can just go over in a minute. But I like his name is Jiko Bo. He's the monk character who, in the beginning he seems like a good guy, but then you find out he's kind of an antagonist also. So I thought he was a very interesting, complex character because he's technically a chill guy, throughout. He's not, evil, bwahaha. It's not a thing where, he seems like a good guy at first and then he's a bad guy. In general, he seems like the same character. It's just, who he's working for, essentially. He's friendly to Ashitaka, and it seems like even when he's, working against him, he's still friendly towards him. It just turns out he has, goals of killing the forest god to get rich off the emperor, which is a detail they mentioned. Kind of like the prince in the missing prince from Hayao Miyazaki. Howl's Moving Castle. It's the tiny detail in the beginning that's expand afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very, I don't know. Any thoughts before we go about that? Or?
I think we've kind of hit everything for me. So I enjoyed it.
Okay.
It was a good movie. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as Howl's. I think I preferred Howl's.
No, I don't think this is a bad movie. It's far from a bad movie at all. But again, my preference personally is Howl's Moving Castle. I know there's a lot of people who think the opposite, who think this is Miyazaki's best movie. But for me, I think part of it's because I watched it later than his other movies. But also, I think, I don't know, Howl's Moving Castle hits more personally for me. But yeah, this is still an amazing movie. I don't think we can deny that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No. With that, I enjoyed it. Let's move on to the next movie. Let's do it.
Yeah, okay, so we were talking about how Miyazaki movies being kids' movies. Well, this one is not a kids' movie. And it's also not Hayao Miyazaki. So we said Studio Ghibli. We never said Hayao Miyazaki movies. And although Studio Ghibli is mostly Miyazaki movies, I wanted to pick at least one.
I'd say about 70%. It's not
which is still a lot. It's still a lot, though.
Yeah, man.
We've picked 2 Miyazaki movies so far, so just in case, I decided to go for a movie that was not made by Hayao Miyazaki, but probably the second most prominent filmmaker from Studio Ghibli, and that's Isao Takahata. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He's done a couple of movies for Studio Ghibli, but probably his most famous one is Grave of the Fireflies.
Okay.
Now this one is most certainly not a kid's movie.
Okay.
And it's gonna be an interesting one. I'm not gonna spoil too much about it, but it's gonna be interesting to talk about. So
don't know that film. I'm not gonna lie.
It'd be best if you don't know anything about it. It's one of those films where the less you know about, the better. But I think it'll give some interesting discussion. So yeah, now's your time to maybe check out Grave of the Fireflies. So. Yeah, for our theme of Studio Ghibli. Anything else to close?
Until next time, nerds!